Commander Zak'Tul's four eyes remained fixed on the sensor readings, his scaled hands trembling as he processed what he was seeing.
In his 200 years of service to the Zephyrian Empire, he had never witnessed anything quite like this. The border monitoring station Eternal Watch had detected countless ships over the decades, but none had ever crossed the sacred boundary without authorization.
None had ever survived the automated defense systems.
None had ever made it this far.
None had ever made it this far into Zephyrian space.
Yet here was an unidentified vessel, its design unlike anything in the galactic databases, limping through space with the determination of a wounded predator. The ship's hull bore the scars of countless battles, scorched metal twisted into impossible shapes, yet somehow it continued to function. More disturbing still were the energy signatures emanating from within its core. The readings defied every known law of physics. "Sir, should we activate the Terminus protocols?" asked Lieutenant Vextra, her voice barely concealing her fear. The Terminus protocols were the Empire's ultimate response to border violations. No ship, no matter how advanced, had ever survived their activation. They had been created by the ancients themselves, the mysterious race that had established the Galactic Council and its absolute laws. Zak'Tul studied the approaching vessel more carefully. Its design was crude by galactic standards, composed of materials that should have disintegrated under the stress of faster-than-light travel. Yet somehow, impossibly, it was not only intact, but actively scanning their station. The scans themselves were another impossibility. No known species possessed scanning technology capable of penetrating Zephyrian shielding. Yet this ship was somehow mapping every detail of their defensive systems. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer Drellpan, his voice tight with confusion. "It's using an unknown protocol, but our systems are automatically translating it." "Put it through," Zak'Tul ordered, his military training overriding his growing unease. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that made Zak'Thul's blood freeze. The being was bipedal, with pale skin stretched over what appeared to be an internal skeletal structure. Most disturbing were its eyes, two forward-facing orbs that seemed to burn with an inner fire. When it spoke, its voice carried a weight of authority that seemed to press against the very air. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiance. We are requesting safe passage through your territory. We are not here to fight, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." Zak'Tul found his voice after several long moments. "Unknown vessel, you have violated Imperial space in direct contravention of galactic law. Prepare to be destroyed." The human's expression didn't change, but something shifted in those burning eyes. "You can try," she said simply. "But before you do, you should know that we've already taken out 3 of your so-called invincible border fortresses. Your weapons are impressive, but they're based on technology that's at least 1,000 years out of date." The communication cut, leaving the bridge of the Eternal Watch in stunned silence. Zak'Tul quickly accessed the fortress monitoring systems, his heart sinking as he discovered that 3 of the most heavily defended installations in the sector had indeed gone dark in the past 72 hours. Each fortress was supposed to be impregnable, protected by energy shields that could withstand the impact of a small star. Yet somehow, this impossible ship had destroyed them. "Sir, the vessel is changing course," reported Navigator Thelthos. "It's heading directly for our position." Zak'Tul watched in fascination as the human ship approached. As it drew closer, he could see the true extent of the damage it had sustained. Entire sections of hull had been torn away, revealing the complex inner workings beneath. But rather than weakness, the exposed systems seemed to pulse with their own malevolent energy. Cables and conduits that should have been destroyed by vacuum exposure were somehow functioning normally, crackling with power that made his instruments scream warnings. "Activate all defensive systems," he ordered. If this creature thinks it can intimidate the Zephyrian Empire, it's about to learn otherwise. The station's weapon systems came online with a deep thrumming that could be felt throughout the structure. Plasma cannons capable of melting through a mile of solid titanium swiveled toward the approaching vessel. Energy projectors that could disrupt the very atomic bonds of matter began charging to full power. The Eternal Watch was more than a monitoring station. It was a fully armed fortress designed to stop entire fleets. Yet as the human ship drew within weapons range, something unprecedented happened. The station's targeting system simply stopped working. Every sensor, every tracking device, every computer system designed to lock onto enemy vessels suddenly reported that there was nothing there. The ship remained clearly visible to the naked eye, but their most advanced technology couldn't seem to acknowledge its existence. "What's happening to our systems?" Zak'Tul demanded. "I don't know, sir," replied Tactical Officer Grendel, his hands flying over his console in growing panic. "Everything was functioning normally, and then it just stopped. It's as if the ship doesn't exist, but we can see it right there. The Defiance continued its approach, now close enough for Zachthul to make out individual details of its construction. The ship was larger than he had initially realized, easily 3 times the size of their station. But what truly caught his attention were the weapon systems visible along its hull. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, organic-looking structures that seemed to pulse and writhe as if they were alive. As he watched, several of these weapons began to glow with an ominous red light. "Sir, we're being hailed again," Drelpan reported. The human captain reappeared on screen, her expression unchanged. "Commander Zachthul, we've disabled your weapon systems as a precautionary measure. We don't want to destroy your station, but we need to talk. There are things happening in this galaxy that you need to understand." "How do you know my name?" Zachthul whispered, a chill running down his spine. "We know a lot of things," Captain Chen replied. "We know that your empire believes it rules this sector of space through divine right. We know that you've never questioned why the Galactic Council's laws are so absolute. Most importantly, we know that you've never wondered what happened to the species that refused to comply with those laws." The screen flickered, and suddenly it was filled with images that made Zachthul's minds reel. Vast fleets of ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. Worlds burning under weapons that seemed to tear reality itself apart. And at the center of it all, the humans, fighting with a desperation and fury that seemed to defy all logic. "These are memories," Captain Chen continued, "from the war that your council tried to erase from history. The war where they attempted to exterminate humanity for refusing to accept their authority. They failed, Commander. We're still here, and we're no longer hiding." The images shifted, showing the Defiance itself in its original condition. It had once been a beautiful vessel, sleek and purposeful, designed for exploration rather than war. But as the slideshow continued, Zachthul watched in horror as it was transformed. Battle by battle, the ship had adapted, incorporating technology from defeated enemies, evolving into something that was no longer entirely mechanical. "What are you?" he managed to ask. "We're what happens when you corner a species that refuses to die," Captain Chen replied. "We're what happens when you underestimate the will to survive, and we're what happens when you give a species enough time to learn from its enemies." The communication ended again, but this time, the silence on the bridge was different. It was the silence of beings who had just realized that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained order through absolute authority. Species that complied were allowed to prosper. Those that resisted simply vanished, their worlds left empty, their names erased from history. But humanity hadn't vanished. Somehow they had survived the Council's extermination attempt and emerged stronger than before. The ship floating before them was proof of that survival, a testament to a species that had refused to accept defeat. "Commander," Vextra said quietly, "what are your orders?" Zachthul stared at the Defiance, trying to process the implications of its presence. If the humans were telling the truth, if they had indeed survived a direct confrontation with the Galactic Council, then everything his people believed about the Universal Order was a lie. The Council wasn't invincible, the borders weren't absolute, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space there were other species who had been written off as extinct but might still be fighting for their freedom. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered finally, "and prepare a diplomatic suite. I think we need to hear what these humans have to say." As the Eternal Watch powered down its defensive systems, the Defiance moved into docking position with a grace that belied its battered appearance. Zachthul couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered as the beginning of the end for the galactic order that had existed for millennia. The humans had crossed the border, and in doing so they had proven that the rules everyone had lived by for so long were nothing more than carefully maintained illusions. The real question was, what were they planning to do next? The docking bay of the Eternal Watch had never hosted a vessel like the Defiance. As the human ship settled into the massive chamber, Zachthul found himself studying its design with a mixture of fascination and dread. Up close, the damage was even more apparent, but so was something else. The ship was healing itself. Where he had observed torn hull plating and exposed systems from a distance, he now saw those same sections slowly knitting back together. Metal flowed like liquid to fill gaps, while new components seemed to grow from within the ship's structure. It was as if the vessel was some sort of living organism rather than a constructed machine. "Commander, the biological scanners are detecting massive life signs throughout the ship," reported Science Officer Peltan, her voice tight with confusion. "But the readings don't match any known species in our databases. It's almost as if the ship itself is alive." Zachthul's unease deepened. In all his years of service, he had encountered many strange phenomena. but a living starship was beyond his experience. The implications were staggering. If humans had somehow learned to create vessels that could heal themselves, adapt to new threats, and potentially even evolve, then their technological capabilities far exceeded anything the Empire possessed. "Sir, we're receiving a request for permission to board," Drelpan announced. "The human captain wishes to meet with you personally." "Very well," Zakthul replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Have security teams positioned throughout the diplomatic levels, but tell them to keep their weapons powered down. We don't know what these creatures are capable of, and I don't want to provoke them unnecessarily." As the boarding tube extended from the station to connect with the Defiance, Zakthul made his way to the reception chamber. The room had been designed to impress visiting dignitaries with the power and sophistication of the Zephyrian Empire. Ancient tapestries depicted the great victories of their military forces, while holographic displays showed the vastness of their territory. Today, however, all of that seemed insignificant compared to what was about to unfold. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and Captain Sarah Chen stepped through, followed by what Zakthul assumed was her security detail. The humans were smaller than he had expected, their soft-looking flesh seemingly vulnerable compared to the hardened scales and natural armor of most galactic species. But there was something in their movements, a predatory grace that suggested they were far more dangerous than their appearance indicated. Captain Chen herself was a study in contrasts. She appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years of experience. But those same eyes burned with an intensity that made Zakthul's instincts scream warnings. This was not a being to be underestimated. "Commander Zakthul," she said, extending her hand in what he recognized as a human greeting gesture. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know our arrival must have been quite a shock." Zakthul gingerly accepted the handshake, surprised by the strength in her grip. "Captain Chen, your presence here raises many questions, not least of which is how your ship survived passage through our border defenses." "Your border defenses are impressive," Chen acknowledged, "but they were designed to stop conventional threats." "Humanity stopped being conventional a long time ago." She moved to the large viewing port that dominated one wall of the reception chamber, gazing out at the stars beyond. "Tell me, Commander, what do you know about the Plague Wars?" "I've never heard of them," Zakthul admitted. "Should I have?" "According to the official galactic records, no. According to those same records, humanity was wiped out by engineered plague approximately 200 years ago. Our entire solar system was supposedly sterilized to prevent the disease from spreading to other worlds." Chen turned back to face him, and Zakthul saw something terrible in her expression. "The plague was real, Commander. It was engineered by the Galactic Council specifically to target human genetics. We lost 8 billion people in the first wave alone. Our homeworld became a charnel house overnight." The weight of her words hit Zakthul like a physical blow. If what she was saying was true, then the Council had committed genocide on an unimaginable scale. But that was impossible. The Council existed to maintain peace and order throughout the galaxy. They were the guardians of civilization itself. "That's impossible," he said. "The Council would never authorize such an action." "They exist to protect all sapient species. Do they?" Chen asked quietly. "Or do they exist to maintain their own power? Tell me, Commander, in your Empire's history, have you ever encountered a species that simply vanished overnight?" Worlds that were once inhabited but are now mysteriously empty. Zakthul felt a chill run through his body. There were indeed such worlds scattered throughout Zephyrian space. Ancient ruins that spoke of once thriving civilizations, now silent and abandoned. The official explanation was that these species had simply died out naturally or had chosen to relocate to other regions of the galaxy. "I see the recognition in your eyes," Chen continued. "Those empty worlds weren't abandoned, Commander. They were cleansed. Any species that refused to accept Council authority was systematically eliminated, their existence erased from official records. Humanity was supposed to be just another entry on that list. But you survived," Zakthul said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Barely," Chen admitted. "When the plague hit, our government and military structures collapsed almost immediately. Billions died in the first few months. But humans have one trait that the Council underestimated. We're stubborn. Even as our world burned around us, there were those who refused to give up." The captain moved to another part of the room, where a holographic projector allowed her to display images from her ship's memory banks. The scenes that appeared made Zakthul's stomachs churn. Vast cities reduced to smoking ruins, Mountains of corpses being burned in massive pyres. And through it all, small groups of humans fighting desperately to survive. We went underground, Chen continued. Literally and figuratively. Those of us who survived the initial plague waves retreated to deep bunkers and isolated stations. We studied the disease, learned how to fight it, and eventually developed immunity. But by then, the Council had declared humanity extinct and moved on to other targets. The images shifted to show humans emerging from their hiding places, their faces hard with determination. Zaktul watched in fascination as they began to rebuild, but not as they had before. These humans were changed, forged by suffering into something harder and more focused than their predecessors had been. We spent the next 100 years preparing, Chen said. We studied every piece of Council technology we could find. We analyzed their tactics, their strategies, their weaknesses, and we discovered something interesting. For all their power and authority, the Council species had grown soft. They relied too heavily on their technology, too comfortable in their assumed superiority. Is that when you built ships like the Defiance? Zakthul asked. Ships like the Defiance weren't built, Chen corrected. They were grown. One of the things we learned during our exile was that the line between organic and mechanical technology was largely artificial. Why build a ship that could break when you could grow one that could adapt? She gestured toward the viewing port, where the Defiance was visible in the docking bay. Every component of that ship is alive in some sense. The hull can repair itself, the weapon systems can evolve to counter new threats, and the computer systems can learn and adapt in real time. It's not just a ship, Commander. It's an organism specifically designed for war. Zakthul stared at the vessel with new understanding. No wonder their weapon systems had failed to target it. The ship had probably analyzed their scanning frequencies and developed countermeasures faster than their computers could adapt. It wasn't just advanced technology, it was evolutionary advantage made manifest. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Information, Chen replied simply. We need to know which species in this region are willing to fight for their freedom, and which ones are too frightened to act. The Council's power comes from the belief that resistance is futile. We intend to prove otherwise. You're planning to challenge the Council directly? Zakthul couldn't hide his shock. Even the most powerful individual species in the galaxy wouldn't dare to directly confront the Council. The combined military might of the member civilizations was simply too vast to overcome. We're planning to destroy them, Chen said calmly, completely and permanently. But we can't do it alone. We need allies, species who have been oppressed by the Council's laws but have been too afraid to resist. Species who remember what freedom felt like before the borders were drawn. She moved closer to Zaktul, and he could feel the intensity radiating from her like heat from a star. Your empire is powerful, Commander, but you're not free. You can't explore beyond your assigned borders. You can't develop certain technologies without Council approval. You can't even determine your own population levels without their oversight. You're not an empire. You're a very large prison. The words hit Zaktul with uncomfortable accuracy. There were indeed many restrictions placed on Zephyrian expansion and development, justified as necessary for galactic stability. But he had never questioned them before. They were simply the natural order of things. Even if what you're saying is true, he said slowly. The Council's military forces are vast. No single species could hope to defeat them in open warfare. You're right, Chen agreed. No single species could. But we're not planning to fight them as a single species. We're planning to fight them as something they've never encountered before. A truly unified resistance. Every species they've oppressed, every world they've silenced, every civilization they've tried to erase. All of us together, fighting for the same goal. And you think the Zephyrian Empire would join such a resistance? I think individual Zephyrians will, Chen said. People like you, who can see the truth when it's presented to them, who understand that freedom is worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. Before Zaktul could respond, an urgent alarm began sounding throughout the station. Drelpan's voice crackled over the communication system. Commander, we have multiple contacts approaching. Council enforcement fleet signatures detected. They'll be here within the hour. Chen smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Right on schedule. The Council must have detected our border crossing and decided to investigate. This will be their first lesson in why the old rules no longer apply. You knew they were coming? Zakthul asked. We counted on it, Chen replied. The Council's arrogance is one of their greatest weaknesses. They can't conceive of a threat they can't simply overwhelm with superior force. They're about to learn that humanity has had 2 centuries to prepare for this exact scenario. She activated a communication device attached to her wrist. Chen, to Defiance. Prepare for combat operations. Full defensive posture, weapons free. Captain, came the reply. All systems are ready. The children are eager to play. Zaktal caught the strange phrasing. Children? The ship's AI systems, Chen explained. We don't build artificial intelligences, Commander. We raise them. Each one is unique, with its own personality and capabilities. They see us as parents, and threats to humanity as threats to their family. As if to emphasize the point, the Defiance began to change before their eyes. The damaged sections that had been slowly healing suddenly accelerated their repairs, while new structures began emerging from the ship's hull. Weapons ports that hadn't been visible before opened like blooming flowers, revealing armaments that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. Commander, Chen said, turning back to Zakthul, in the next hour, you're going to witness something that will change your understanding of what's possible in this universe. When it's over, you'll have a choice to make. You can report what you've seen to your superiors and hope they protect you from the consequences. Or you can join us and help write a new future for every species in this galaxy. The Defiance had completed its transformation, and Zaktul could barely recognize it as the same vessel that had arrived only hours before. It now bristled with weapon systems that defied easy categorization, while energy shields visible to the naked eye wrapped around its hull like protective cocoons. The Council fleet will arrive expecting to find a damaged human vessel and a compliant border station, Chen continued. Instead, they'll encounter something they've never seen before. Humans who refuse to run, refuse to hide, and refuse to die quietly. She moved toward the airlock, preparing to return to her ship. Think carefully about what you witnessed today, Commander. And remember that what you're seeing is just the beginning. We've been planning this war for 200 years. We're finally ready to end it. As the humans departed, leaving Zakthul alone with his thoughts and fears, the approaching Council fleet drew ever closer. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine not just the fate of his station, but possibly the future of the entire galactic order. The Council Enforcement Fleet emerged from hyperspace with the precision that had become their trademark over 3 millennia of absolute authority. 12 massive dreadnoughts materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive silver coating that marked them as vessels of the Galactic Council itself. Each ship was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapon systems that could reduce entire worlds to cosmic dust. Leading the fleet was the Divine Authority, flagship of Fleet Admiral Korax Nen of the Altarian hegemony. The Admiral was a member of one of the Council's founding species, a being whose crystalline body contained the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 years of life. In all that time, he had never encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved through the application of overwhelming force. Admiral, reported his tactical officer, we have visual confirmation of the border violation. The vessel appears to be of unknown design, currently docked with Station Eternal Watch. Korax Nin studied the tactical display with growing irritation. The ship in question was clearly damaged, its hull scarred with battle damage that spoke of multiple engagements. Yet somehow it had penetrated deeper into Zephyrian space than any unauthorized vessel in recorded history. More troubling still, the station commander had apparently chosen to offer the intruders hospitality rather than destroying them immediately. Hail the station, he ordered. I want to speak with Commander Zaktul immediately. The communication channel opened, revealing the Zephyrian commander's nervous face on the main screen. Korax Nin had dealt with Zaktul before and had always found him to be a competent, if unimaginative, officer. Today, however, something was different. The commander's usual deference was replaced by something that looked almost like resolve. Admiral Korax Nin, Zakthul said. I wasn't expecting a full enforcement fleet for what appears to be a simple border incident. Simple? Korax Nin's voice carried the crystalline harmonic that indicated extreme displeasure. Commander, that vessel has violated 3 separate territorial boundaries and destroyed multiple council installations. The beings aboard that ship are responsible for the deaths of thousands of loyal citizens. There is nothing simple about this situation. The humans claimed they were defending themselves, Zakthul replied carefully. They say the installations attacked them without provocation.
Humans? The word carried layers of disbelief.
Commander, are you suffering from some form of mental breakdown? The human species was declared extinct over 2 centuries ago. That's what I thought as well, Zaktul said. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The captain of the vessel has provided detailed records of their survival and subsequent development. Admiral, if their claims are accurate, then our understanding of recent galactic history may be significantly flawed. Korax Nin felt something that he hadn't experienced in centuries, genuine surprise. The idea that an entire species could have survived a council extinction order was beyond his comprehension. Such orders were carried out with absolute precision, verified through multiple independent sources. There were no survivors because survivors were not permitted to exist.
Commander, you will immediately transfer the occupants of that vessel to our custody. Any records they have provided will be turned over for proper analysis.
This situation will be handled according to standard protocols. I'm afraid I can't do that, Admiral, Zaktul replied, and now there was definitely steel in his voice. I've reviewed the evidence they've provided and I believe their claims warrant serious consideration. I'm requesting that this matter be referred to the full council for deliberation rather than handled through enforcement action. The communication channel went silent as Corex Nin processed this unprecedented act of defiance. In 3,000 years of council authority, no station commander had ever refused a direct order from an enforcement fleet. The very concept was so alien that his tactical computers were unable to provide appropriate response protocols. Commander, he said finally, you are relieved of duty pending investigation. Security teams will board your station within the hour to take control of the situation. Do not attempt to interfere with this action. Admiral, I respectfully decline to recognize your authority in this matter, Zaktul replied. The Zephyrian Empire maintains sovereign rights within its own territory, and I am invoking those rights to protect what may be the most significant diplomatic contact in galactic history. Before Corexin could respond, the communication was cut from the station's end. For several long moments, the bridge of the Divine Authority remained silent as its crew tried to process what they had just witnessed. Finally, the Admiral turned to his tactical officer. Prepare boarding operations. If the station commander won't cooperate willingly, we'll remove him by force and target that unknown vessel for immediate destruction. Whatever's aboard that ship, it's clearly corrupted the station personnel beyond recovery. Sir, the tactical officer replied, our targeting systems can't seem to lock onto the unknown vessel. All scanners report negative contact despite visual confirmation of its presence. Corex Nin moved to his personal tactical station, running his own diagnostic scans on the mysterious ship. The results were exactly as reported. Every sensor in the fleet could clearly detect the station, the docking bay, even the individual Zephyrians moving within the facility. But the space where the human vessel was docked registered as completely empty. Expand sensor sweeps to full spectrum, he ordered. Use gravitational lensing if necessary. No vessel can hide from Council sensors indefinitely. As his fleet's most advanced scanning systems focused on the Defiance, Captain Chen was standing on her ship's bridge, watching their efforts with amusement. The bridge itself would have been unrecognizable to any conventional starship designer. Rather than rigid metal and crystalline displays, the command center seemed to have been grown from some sort of organic polymer. Surfaces flowed and shifted in response to the crew's needs, while information was transmitted through neural interfaces that made traditional communication unnecessary. Captain, her first officer reported. Though the communication was transmitted directly into her consciousness rather than spoken aloud, their scanning intensity is increasing exponentially. Should we begin defensive measures? Not yet, Chen replied. Let them exhaust their conventional options first. They need to understand that everything they think they know about warfare is obsolete. She moved to what might have been termed the captain's chair, though it was actually a living organism that bonded with her nervous system to provide complete integration with the ship's consciousness. Through this connection, she could feel the Defiance's growing excitement as it prepared for combat. The ship's AI had been waiting for this moment for decades, eager to test its capabilities against Council forces. Admiral Corex Nin seems frustrated, observed the ship's primary AI, its voice carrying undertones of childlike glee. His fleet's targeting systems are having difficulty accepting that we exist. That's the beauty of evolutionary technology, Chen replied. We don't fight their systems directly. We simply convince them that we're not worth fighting. The Defiance had been designed around a simple principle. Rather than trying to match Council firepower directly, they would make that firepower irrelevant. The ship's hull was composed of materials that could alter their physical properties in real time, shifting between states of matter as needed. When Council sensors tried to lock onto the vessel, the hull simply became something that their targeting protocols couldn't recognize as a valid target. Captain, they're launching boarding shuttles toward the station, her tactical officer reported. And there's our cue, Chen said. Begin Phase 1 operations. Let's show the Admiral what happens when you threaten our friends. The change in the Defiance was subtle at first. The ship's organic hull began to shift and ripple, creating patterns that seemed to confuse the eye. But as Council shuttles approached the station, something extraordinary happened. The space around the human vessel began to distort, as if reality itself was being bent and twisted.
On the bridge of the Divine Authority, chaos erupted as instruments began providing impossible readings. Admiral, his science officer, reported, "We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies around the target vessel. The readings suggest the presence of a black hole, but that's obviously impossible." "Obviously," Corexnin agreed grimly, but his instruments insisted otherwise. According to every sensor in the fleet, the space around the human ship had somehow acquired the gravitational signature of a stellar mass black hole. The boarding shuttles caught in the impossible gravity well were being pulled inexorably toward what their instruments insisted was certain destruction. "Emergency. Recall of all shuttles," the Admiral ordered. "Full reverse thrust, maximum engine power." But it was too late. The shuttles were already past the event horizon of what couldn't possibly exist but definitely seemed to be there. Yet instead of being torn apart by gravitational forces, the small craft simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not crushed, just gone, as if they had never existed at all. "What happened to them?" demanded the tactical officer. "According to our sensors, they were absorbed by the gravitational anomaly," the science officer replied. "But Admiral, the readings make no sense. A black hole of that mass should be affecting our entire fleet, possibly the entire star system. Yet we're detecting no gravitational effects beyond the immediate vicinity of the target." Corexnin studied the tactical display with growing unease. In 3,000 years of Council dominance, they had encountered species with advanced technology, exotic weapons systems, and even limited reality manipulation capabilities. But this was beyond anything in their experience. The humans appeared to be able to selectively alter the fundamental laws of physics in their immediate vicinity while leaving the broader universe unchanged. "Sir, we're receiving a communication from the unknown vessel," his communications officer reported. "Put it through." Captain Chen appeared on the main screen, her expression calm and professional. Behind her, the organic curves of her ship's bridge were clearly visible, along with crew members who moved with the fluid grace of beings perfectly adapted to their environment. "Admiral Corexnin," she said, "I believe you've lost some shuttles. Don't worry, your crews are safe. We've simply relocated them to a place where they can't interfere with our conversation." "Return them immediately," Corexnin demanded, "and surrender yourself for processing. Your continued resistance only delays the inevitable." "Does it?" Chen asked. "Admiral, in the past hour you've discovered that your sensors can't target our ship, your conventional tactics are useless against our defenses, and we can make your personnel disappear at will. At what point do you start questioning whether the inevitable outcome is the one you're expecting?" She gestured, and the space around the Defiance began to change again. This time, instead of a gravitational anomaly, the ship seemed to multiply. One moment there was a single vessel, the next there were dozens, each one identical to the original and apparently equally real. "Your fleet represents the absolute pinnacle of Council military technology," Chen continued as Corexnin watched his tactical displays struggle to process the multiplication of targets. 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Under normal circumstances, a single ship wouldn't stand a chance against such overwhelming force. Quote. She smiled, and something in that expression made Corexnin's crystalline form resonate with sympathetic vibrations of unease. "But these aren't normal circumstances, Admiral. And we're not a normal ship. We represent 200 years of human ingenuity, determination, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. We've studied your tactics, analyzed your technology, and prepared countermeasures for every weapon system in your arsenal." The multiple images of the Defiance began to move, taking up positions around the Council fleet with impossible speed. Each copy seemed to be completely solid and real, generating its own sensor signatures and energy readings. "You're facing the evolution of warfare itself," Chen said. "Not bigger guns or stronger shields, but a completely new paradigm that renders your advantages meaningless. Your weapons can't target what they can't understand. Your tactics can't counter strategies that rewrite the rules of engagement in real time." She leaned forward, and her image seemed to reach across the vast distance between ships to stare directly into Corexnin's multifaceted eyes. "This is your only warning, Admiral. Withdraw your fleet and report to the Council that the age of unquestioned authority is over. Tell them that humanity has returned, and we're no longer the victims in this story." The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Divine Authority in stunned silence. Around them, the multiple copies of the human vessel maintained their positions, each one a reminder that everything the Council thought they knew about military superiority had just become obsolete. Corexnin faced a choice that no Council admiral had ever been forced to make. retreat in the face of a superior opponent, or press the attack against an enemy that had already demonstrated the ability to neutralize his most advanced systems. For the first time in 1,000 years of life, the Admiral truly didn't know what to do next. Admiral Korexnin had commanded fleets for over 800 years, and in all that time he had never encountered a situation where retreat was even a consideration. The very concept went against everything he had been taught about Council supremacy. Yet as he stared at the tactical display showing multiple copies of the human vessels surrounding his fleet, he found himself questioning assumptions that had seemed as fundamental as the laws of physics themselves. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "The unknown vessels are maintaining position but showing no aggressive intent. All weapon systems appear to be powered down." "Appear to be," Korexnin repeated grimly. "Given what we've already witnessed, I'm not inclined to trust our sensor readings where these humans are concerned." He activated his fleet-wide communication system. "All ships maintain defensive formation but do not initiate hostilities. I want full spectrum analysis of the target vessels. If there's a weakness in their technology, I want it found." As his crews worked frantically to understand what they were facing, Captain Chen was reviewing the situation from the bridge of the Defiance. The multiple copies of her ship were actually projections created by manipulating the electromagnetic spectrum in ways that Council sensors couldn't distinguish from reality. It was a psychological tactic as much as a military one, designed to make the enemy question their own capabilities, rather than simply outgunning them. "Captain," her science officer reported, "the Council fleet is attempting deep scan analysis of our hull composition. Should we maintain the illusion?" "For now," Chen replied. "Let them study us all they want. The more they learn about what they think they're seeing, the less they'll understand what we actually are." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to Commander Zak Thul on the station. It's time for the next phase of our demonstration." On the Eternal Watch, Zak Thul was struggling with the implications of what he was witnessing. His own sensors were confirming what the Council fleet was reporting. Somehow, a single human vessel had multiplied itself and was now capable of surrounding 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy.
But more troubling than the technological impossibility was what it suggested about the balance of power in the galaxy.
"Commander," Drelpan announced, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Chen." "Put her through." The human captain appeared on his personal screen, and Zaktul noticed that the background behind her had changed. Instead of the organic curves of her ship's bridge, he could see what appeared to be a vast chamber filled with intricate machinery that seemed to pulse with its own internal life. "Commander," Chen said, "I hope you're finding our little display educational. But what you've seen so far is just the opening act. The Admiral seems reluctant to withdraw, so we're going to have to be more persuasive." "What are you planning to do?" Zakthul asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "We're going to give the Council fleet a demonstration of what human military technology is actually capable of," Chen replied. "Don't worry, we're not going to destroy them. Dead martyrs serve no purpose. But they need to understand that their era of unquestioned dominance is over." The transmission ended, leaving Zakthul staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the confrontation between forces that represented two completely different approaches to galactic civilization. The Council fleet embodied 3 millennia of technological refinement and overwhelming force. The human ship represented something entirely different: adaptation, evolution, and the willingness to rewrite the fundamental rules of warfare itself. "Sir," Vextra reported quietly, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the human vessel. All copies are showing identical power signatures." "Are they preparing to attack?" Zakthul asked. "I don't think so. The energy patterns don't match any known weapon system. It's almost like they're preparing to... I'm not sure what they're preparing to do." On the Divine Authority, Admiral Korex Nen was asking himself the same question. Every sensor in his fleet was detecting energy levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of the Defiance's apparent size to generate, yet the readings were consistent across all instruments and all ships. Whatever the humans were preparing, it was beyond anything in his experience. Admiral, his science officer, reported, "The energy readings from the target vessels have exceeded safe parameters for this star system. If they release that much power all at once, the gravitational effects could destabilize planetary orbits throughout the region. That's impossible." Korexinin replied automatically. "No single ship could carry power generation systems of that magnitude. Sir, with respect, everything we've witnessed in the past few hours should have been impossible. Perhaps it's time to consider that our understanding of what's possible may be incomplete."
Before Corexnin could respond, space around the Council fleet began to change. It started as a subtle rippling effect, like heat distortion over a sun-baked surface. But quickly it became something far more dramatic. The stars themselves seemed to bend and twist, their light forming impossible patterns that hurt to look at directly. "What's happening?" demanded the tactical officer. "Unknown, sir," came the reply. "Our instruments are detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the entire region. It's as if local space-time is being actively manipulated." On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Chen watched with satisfaction as her ship's most advanced systems came online. The vessel's living hull had been infused with exotic matter that existed in a state of quantum superposition, allowing it to manipulate the fabric of reality within a limited radius. It was technology that the Council couldn't hope to understand because it was based on principles they had never discovered. "Phase 2 complete," her tactical officer reported. "Local space-time is now under our control. Council fleet mobility is restricted to normal drive systems only." "Excellent," Chen replied. "Now let's show them what happens when they lose their technological advantages." The space around the Council fleet had become a maze of gravitational anomalies and spatial distortions that made faster-than-light travel impossible. But more than that, the distortions were interfering with the operation of the fleet's most advanced systems. Weapons that relied on exotic energy discharges found their targeting disrupted by localized gravity wells. Communication systems designed to operate across galactic distances were reduced to short-range transmissions only. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we've lost contact with 6 ships in the fleet. They're still visible, but all subspace communication is being blocked." "And our weapons?" Corexnin asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Severely impaired, sir. The spatial distortions are interfering with targeting solutions and energy discharge patterns. We're effectively reduced to conventional kinetic weapons only." For the first time in his long life, Admiral Corexnin truly understood what it meant to be helpless. His fleet, which had seemed invincible only hours before, was now trapped in a region of space where their most sophisticated technologies simply didn't function. They were like primitives with stone weapons facing an enemy armed with energy projectors. "Sir," the tactical officer continued, "the human vessels are moving into attack formation." On the main screen, the multiple copies of the Defiance were indeed shifting position. But rather than surrounding the Council fleet for a concentrated assault, they were spacing themselves at precise intervals throughout the distorted region. As Corexnin watched, each ship began to glow with the same ominous energy that had preceded the spatial manipulation. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the lead human vessel," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." Captain Chen reappeared, but now her image was accompanied by data streams that showed the current status of every ship in the Council fleet. Somehow, the humans had gained access to detailed information about fleet strength, weapons loadouts, and defensive capabilities. Information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. "Admiral Corexnin," Chen began. "As you can see, we now have complete tactical superiority over your fleet. Your ships are trapped in a region where your advanced systems are non-functional, while our capabilities remain unimpaired. By any reasonable military assessment, you are now at our mercy." She paused, letting the implications of that statement sink in. "However," she continued, "we're not going to destroy you. That would serve no purpose, except to create martyrs for the Council to remember. Instead, we're going to give you a gift. The knowledge that everything your civilization believes about military supremacy is obsolete." The energy levels around the human vessels suddenly spiked, and space itself seemed to scream in protest. For a moment that lasted an eternity, every sensor in the Council fleet registered readings that defied comprehension. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the effect stopped. When Admiral Corexnin's vision cleared and his instruments stabilized, he found himself staring at a tactical display that showed his greatest fears realized. The Divine Authority, flagship of the Council fleet and one of the most powerful vessels ever constructed, was completely disabled. Life support was functioning, as were basic systems, but everything else had simply stopped working. "Damage report," he ordered, his voice carefully controlled. "No damage detected, sir," his engineering officer replied, confusion evident in his tone. "All systems are intact, but they're not responding to commands. It's as if someone simply told them to stop functioning." "The other ships?" "Same situation throughout the fleet, Admiral. No physical damage, no destroyed components, just complete system shutdown." On his personal screen, Captain Chen was still visible, her expression showing what might have been sympathy. "Your ships are unharmed, Admiral," she said. "But they're also completely defenseless.
We could have destroyed every vessel in your fleet, but instead we chose to demonstrate something far more important, the ability to neutralize your technology without violence. She leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. This is what the future of warfare looks like when conducted by species that have learned to think beyond conventional limitations. Your council has ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for 3,000 years. But technology can be countered and force can be made irrelevant when your enemy refuses to play by your rules. The image shifted to show a schematic of the divine authority with detailed annotations highlighting every major system and vulnerability. It was intelligence that should have taken years of espionage to gather, obtained in a matter of hours, through methods that Corex Nin couldn't even begin to understand. We know everything about your ships, your tactics, and your strategic capabilities, Chen continued. But more importantly, we know everything about your limitations. You've become so accustomed to technological superiority that you've forgotten how to adapt when that superiority is taken away. She gestured, and the tactical display on Corex Nin's bridge suddenly showed dozens of additional contacts appearing throughout the region. Ships unlike anything in the galactic databases, each one radiating energy signatures that suggested capabilities far beyond Council technology. The Defiance isn't alone, Admiral. Humanity has been preparing for this confrontation for 2 centuries. What you're seeing is just one task force from a much larger fleet that has been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The implications hit Corex Nin like a physical blow. If the humans had multiple fleets with capabilities equivalent to what he had witnessed today, then the entire strategic balance of the galaxy had shifted overnight. The Council's assumption of unassailable military superiority was not just wrong, it was catastrophically obsolete. Your fleet will be released in exactly 1 hour, Chen announced. You'll find your systems fully functional and undamaged. Return to the Council and deliver this message. The age of unquestioned authority is over. Species throughout the galaxy have the right to determine their own destinies without interference from distant bureaucrats who have forgotten what freedom means. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Admiral, you seem like a reasonable being. I hope you understand that we're not seeking conquest or revenge. We simply want what every sentient species deserves, the right to exist without fear of arbitrary extinction. The Council can adapt to a universe where they're no longer the ultimate authority, or they can continue to resist and face the consequences of that choice. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Corex Nin alone with the most momentous decision of his long career. He could return to the Council and report accurately on what he had witnessed, knowing that such a report would likely be dismissed as impossible or treasonous. Or he could attempt to convince his superiors that the fundamental assumptions underlying their civilization were wrong, and that accommodation with the humans might be the only alternative to a war they couldn't win. Around him, his disabled fleet drifted helplessly through space, distorted by forces beyond their comprehension, while human vessels maintained their positions with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. For the first time in 3 millennia, a Council fleet had been decisively defeated without firing a single shot in response. 3 weeks after the incident at the Zephyrian border, the halls of the Galactic Council were buzzing with unprecedented activity. Emergency sessions had been called every day since Admiral Corex Nin's fleet had returned with their impossible report. Council members who had not spoken to each other in centuries were now engaged in heated debates that lasted well into the night cycles of their respective species. The central chamber of the Council was a marvel of engineering that represented the pinnacle of cooperative achievement among dozens of species. The vast spherical space could accommodate beings of radically different physiologies, with environmental controls that could shift between atmospheric conditions in seconds. Today, however, the chamber's harmonious design seemed to emphasize the discord among its occupants. At the center of the sphere, floating in a null-gravity field that allowed for 3-dimensional discussion, the 12 members of the High Council were engaged in the most contentious debate in their organization's 3,000-year history. Each member represented one of the founding species that had established the Galactic Order, and each one was struggling to comprehend the implications of what Admiral Corex Nin had reported. "The report is obviously fabricated," declared Councillor Fexmari of the Valerian Confederacy.
Her crystalline form pulsing with agitated energy.
No single ship could possess the capabilities described. The Admiral has either suffered some form of mental breakdown or has been compromised by unknown alien influences. I've reviewed the sensor logs from all 12 ships in the fleet, countered Councillor Zeph Talon of the Nexus Collective. His cybernetic enhancements allowed him to process data at inhuman speeds, and his analysis of the evidence had been more thorough than anyone else's. The readings are consistent across all platforms and all recording systems. Either every sensor in the fleet simultaneously malfunctioned in exactly the same way, or we're facing a technological capability that exceeds our own by several orders of magnitude. The debate was interrupted by the arrival of a new presence in the chamber. Councillor Vashti of the Ancient Assembly rarely attended council sessions, preferring to commune with the vast archives of knowledge that her species maintained in the galactic core. When she did appear, it was usually to settle disputes that had reached an impasse. Today, her ancient form moved with an urgency that sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. "I have consulted the deep archives," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke directly to the neural systems of every species present. The records of the human extinction event have been examined in detail. There are discrepancies. The chamber fell silent. The deep archives contained the complete history of galactic civilization, recorded and verified by the ancients themselves. If there were discrepancies in such fundamental records, it suggested problems that went to the very core of council authority. "What sort of discrepancies?" asked High Chancellor Morden, his massive form dominating the gravitational center of the chamber. "The termination order for humanity was indeed issued and apparently executed," Vashti replied. "However, verification of the extinction was conducted solely by the species responsible for implementing the action. No independent confirmation was ever obtained, contrary to standard protocols for such operations." The implications of this revelation struck the assembled councillors like a physical blow. Every extinction order in council history had been verified by multiple independent sources to ensure complete success. The fact that humanity's supposed extermination had not been properly confirmed suggested either incompetence or deliberate deception at the highest levels. "Are you suggesting that the plague wars were a failure?" Faxmari asked, her crystalline structure resonating with disbelief. "I'm suggesting that our records may be incomplete," Vashti replied carefully. "The species responsible for the human extinction has not responded to requests for additional documentation. Their current whereabouts are unknown." This revelation sent new waves of unease through the chamber. For a founding species of the Council to simply disappear was unprecedented. Such beings didn't just vanish. They were too powerful, too well-established, too integral to the galactic order. "There's more," Vashti continued. "I've identified 17 other extinction events over the past 2 millennia, where verification protocols were similarly ignored. In each case, the species responsible for implementation has subsequently vanished from council records." High Chancellor Morden's massive form shifted as he processed this information. 17 failed extinctions could mean 17 species that had survived council termination orders and were potentially still out there, harboring grudges that had been festering for centuries or millennia. "We need to reassess our understanding of the current galactic situation," he announced. "If humans have indeed survived and developed the capabilities reported by Admiral Qurex PNE, then we may be facing not just one rogue species, but potentially dozens of civilizations that have been presumed extinct." The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Council's intelligence services. The message was brief but alarming. Human ships had been detected in 17 different star systems simultaneously, all well within the territories of various Council member species. Each contact had been peaceful, consisting of brief exchanges of information followed by immediate departure, but the implications were staggering. "They're mapping our defenses," Zeftalon observed. 17 simultaneous reconnaissance missions suggest a level of coordination and capability that exceeds our worst-case projections. Or they're delivering messages, suggested Councillor Kethvar of the Harmony Synthesis. "Perhaps they're attempting to contact other species that have reasons to resent Council authority." The possibility that humans were actively recruiting allies from among discontented Council members was perhaps the most alarming prospect of all. The galactic order depended on the assumption that individual species were too weak to challenge Council authority, and too divided to cooperate effectively. But if humanity was providing both the technological capability and the organizational framework for a true rebellion, then the entire foundation of galactic civilization was at risk.
"We need to open direct communications," Chancellor Morden decided.
This situation has escalated beyond the point where military action alone can resolve it. If the humans possess the capabilities they've demonstrated, then we need to understand what they want. Meanwhile, in the Zephyrian Empire's capital system, Commander Zaktul was experiencing his own crisis of understanding. The past 3 weeks had brought a constant stream of revelations that had shaken his faith in everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization. The humans had kept their promise to maintain contact, sending regular transmissions that provided detailed information about Council operations that should have been classified beyond his security clearance. They had shown him documentation of the 17 extinct species that were actually very much alive and very interested in evening some old scores. Most disturbing of all, they had provided evidence that the Zephyrian Empire itself had narrowly avoided extinction on 3 separate occasions, only surviving because their compliance with Council demands had made them more useful alive than dead. "Commander," his aide announced, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the human vessel, Defiance. Put Captain Chen through." The human captain appeared on his screen, but she looked different than before. Her expression carried a weight of responsibility that suggested she was no longer just the captain of a single ship, but a representative of something much larger. "Commander Zakthul," she began, "I hope you've found our recent intelligence reports enlightening. We're now ready to move to the next phase of our operation." "Which is?" Zakthul asked, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to know. "A gathering," Chen replied. "We've made contact with 43 species that were supposed to be extinct but are actually alive and very interested in discussing the future of galactic civilization. We're also in communication with dozens of current Council member species who have grown tired of arbitrary restrictions on their development and expansion." She gestured, and the screen split to show a star map with dozens of highlighted systems. Each one, Zakthul realized, represented a potential ally in what was rapidly becoming the largest challenge to Council authority in galactic history. "The meeting will take place at the coordinates I'm transmitting to you," Chen continued. "It's in neutral space, outside any current territorial boundaries. Every species that attends will have the opportunity to help design a new framework for galactic civilization. One based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed submission." "And if the Council refuses to accept such a framework?" Zakthul asked. "Then we'll build it without them," Chen replied simply. "Commander, we've spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. We have the technology, the resources, and the determination to create a new galactic order with or without Council cooperation. But we'd prefer to do it peacefully if possible." The transmission ended, leaving Zakthul to contemplate a choice that would define not just his own future, but the future of his entire civilization. He could report the human offer to his superiors and hope that the Empire would make the right decision. Or he could take the unprecedented step of acting on his own authority to accept an invitation that could reshape the galaxy. 2 days later, the first ships began arriving at the coordinates Chen had provided. The location was a system on the very edge of explored space, containing only a single star and a handful of dead worlds. But as vessels from dozens of different species gathered in the outer system, it became clear that this remote location would witness the most significant diplomatic event in galactic history. The human fleet that was already in position was unlike anything the arriving delegates had expected. Rather than a collection of warships, it appeared to be a mobile civilization. Massive vessels that seemed to be part starship and part living organism drifted through the system, each one capable of supporting millions of beings. Construction ships that defied easy categorization were already at work building what appeared to be a permanent conference facility on one of the system's dead worlds. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching as representatives of civilizations that had been scattered across the galaxy for millennia finally came together in common cause. Some were species that had supposedly been extinct for centuries. Others were current Council members who had decided that the time for change had finally come. "Captain," their first officer reported, "the Council has dispatched a diplomatic mission to the conference site. They're requesting permission to send representatives." "Granted," Chen replied. "They're going to have to learn to participate in discussions as equals rather than dictating terms from a position of assumed superiority. This might as well be their first lesson." As the diplomatic vessel approached the conference site, its occupants could see the scope of what humanity had assembled. Dozens of species, hundreds of ships, and the infrastructure for what appeared to be a permanent settlement. It was not just a meeting. It was the birth of a new civilization. The age of unquestioned Council authority was over. What would replace it remained to be written. But for the first time in 3 millennia, the galaxy's future would be decided by cooperation rather than conquest, by negotiation rather than extinction orders. And at the center of it all, the human vessels continued their patient work of building something that had never existed before, a truly free galactic community, where every species had a voice and no one held ultimate power over the fate of others. The universe was about to become a very different place, and humanity, the species that had been written off as extinct, would be remembered as the catalyst that made it all possible.